Question number 8. A landscape gardener is planning the construction of a garden. This project requires 13 activities, I to U. Of course it does. The directed graph below shows each of these activities represented by edges. The number on the edges are the duration of the activities in days. The cost of reducing the completion time of any activity in this project. Great, we're going to go crashing as well. Now, bearing in mind these last questions are meant to challenge. They are really there for the people trying to get that very, very high 40s or 50s, because you lose a mark on these questions and sadly with further maths you start to plummet down the rankings. The landscape gardener has a maximum of 3,000 to spend on reducing the minimum completion time of the project. Okay, so that means realistically speaking he can only reduce these by 3 days. The total completion time of the project can be reduced by 3 days. There we go. So they've told you 3 days. They're just confirming by reducing activity K by 1 day and activity Q by 2 days. So the first thing I've got to do is I've got to have a look at my completion times, right? So I've got to do that forward scanning and backwards scanning stuff. Now I'm going to do that now and then come back because this takes a long time. Okay, so now having drawn this with my forwards and backwards scanning, and I've marked on my critical path. Now you may look at this, go, hold on a moment, those aren't on the vertices. No, I know, and I love the Cambridge textbook, and that is certainly one way of doing it, but a colleague of mine actually showed me how it might make more sense by doing them on the edges. All right, I know different textbooks do different things, but anyway, irrelevant. The point of this is that because this is crashing, we're looking at the critical path. And I do this in a pretty funky way in the sense of what I'm trying to do is I realize the critical path is actually the longest path through that network. That's the critical path. It's the longest path through the network. So when you add up the critical path, and if I was to add together K and N and Q and T and U, that's what gives me the 23. So by all means, what we need to do then is reduce. When we're crashing, we're reducing or trying to reduce the length of the critical path. And in this situation, they want to reduce it by 3 days, which would make that hopefully 20 days. But when we're crashing, we have to be careful that when we reduce each of the individual activity times, that we don't create a new critical path. And that's what we're checking for every single time we do this. We're not creating a new critical path. Okay, so what I now do is I work my way around my diagram and I try and find out whether there could be a new critical path. Well, the first thing, let's just check the length here. 5, 6, I'm just adding the lengths, it's 6, 11, no, 4, sorry, add that again. Oh. So what I'm now going to do is work around and just check where my new critical paths will be. And there's lots of different ways of doing this. I tend to do it with a highlighter. So 4, 5, just adding the lengths together. 5, that's 10, and there's 9. So there's 19. All right, so going that way on my old critical path, 19. Now, if there's any other way to get between the start and that point there, that's before U1, that takes longer than 19, then I'm stuffed. Because by making the change in part A, I then created a new critical path. And as it turns out, shortcutting this video, what happens is that becomes 4, 5, then I add on the 8, which gives me 13, 19 and 20. So that path there actually would become my new critical path. So in that situation, A would not be the correct answer. So now we're going to look and say, well, okay, B. And again, if you know a quicker way of doing this, please, please, please let me know in the comments below. Reduce activity K by 2 days, so that now becomes 3, and activity Q by 1 day, that becomes 6. All right, so again, let's go around our diagram. So we've got 3, 4, 10, 19. All right, so that one stays as 19. Can I get between those 2 points in any other way? Well, as I work my way around my diagram, and guys, there are lots of ways around it to get between those points, up here and down there, up and around there, and up and around here, and up and down here. There are lots of them, but as I work through this, and again, this is the last question, it's trying to give you that 1 mark, and I would have left this till the end of the exam and come back and done it if I had time. And as it turns out, B is the correct answer, because if you work through all of the rest of those questions, then basically B is the one that actually reduces the time by 3 days without creating a new critical path. Now, a colleague of mine actually does it in a slightly different way, and I'll start it off by showing you how he does it, and then but it's long. What he does is he goes, well, let's look at all the different routes between the start and the finish. And so I could have I to L to O to S to U. And basically does all the lengths in between those. Let's change color. So it goes 2, 4, 6, 1, and 1. And then adds all those together. 2, so what that would give me? 6, 12, 13, 14. So that would give me a path of 14. And then he goes, well, okay, that's one of them. Now I'm going to do no, let's not do I. I've just done that one. There's no other path that can contain I. So then you could J to M to O to S to U. And there could be J to P to U. And basically list them all out. And there's about 7 of them. I think there's 7 or 8 different routes. And then by the time he's done that, he looks for the path that's the longest. And that's the critical path. Okay, and one of these obviously would come out with 23, the K, N, Q, T, and U. Did I just say K, N, Q, T, and U? Yeah. So having done that, then what he will do is he will then go back through all of these and reduce all of them to try and find out whether a new critical path would be gained and which one would then change. All right, it's time consuming, but to be perfectly honest with you, no more time consuming. It might be slightly less than forward scanning and backward scanning and all those type of things. But again, remember that these questions here are really making you work for that 1 mark.